Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Cyrus Davis, and today I have another deck profile for you, this time on Gholdengo Dragapult. So I released a video last week on my tournament report for Milwaukee Regionals where I played this deck. And this is just my update, sort of. Milwaukee has passed. We had multiple major events outside North America last weekend. And then we have Portland Regionals coming up this weekend. So this is sort of my updated list for the deck that I played in Milwaukee going into Portland. Now, leading up to Portland, I honestly wasn't really a fan of playing Dragapult, and so I put a lot of my testing elsewhere. I also don't typically play the same deck twice to majors, just out of habit. So that was another reason that I just sort of have not been putting as much time to the deck. But going after this past weekend's major events, I actually think Gholdengo Dragapult is still a very, very strong play for Portland. I was a bit scared of the Raging Bolt matchup, which I still think is a concern. However, Dragapult and Gardevoir are just so dominant and continuing to be dominant. I mean, that I think Milwaukee was the only regionals won so far by not Dragapult or Gardevoir, and of course, pretty much every event has been won by Gardevoir except the one won by Dragapult in Utrecht. So Gholdengo just very, very strong. The only deck that consistently, in my opinion, has a favorable matchup into both Gardevoir and Dragapult. The Raging Bolt matchup's not that great. I've decided to just tweak this list to sort of just focus all in on beating Gardevoir and Dragapult consistently, because I think that is the best reason to play the deck is favorable matchups into those two decks. So with that being said, let's take a look at what I think is the best way to play the deck going into Portland this weekend, starting with the Pokemon line. So we have a 4/4 Gholdengo, of course. It means our main attacker, our main draw engine. We just want to get it as many as possible. Then we have a 2-2-1 Dragapult line. So the Dragapult line is mostly in here for Drakloak's extra draw. Coin bonus just does not usually feel like enough draw after things like Iono, especially in the late game. So having a bit of extra draw is important. And then Dragapult is mostly here to have a secondary, or to have a attacker that can swing it into Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, which Gholdengo cannot. So that's the biggest thing that you're looking for in partners for Gholdengo EX when you're deciding what variant to play, and that's why the Dragapult build has been consistently the best performing, is that the Dragapult line provides both the extra draw and the attacker into Cornerstone in one. Of course, the Dunsparce is also a strong option, but the Dunsparce is a little bit less consistent. I think it's definitely more aggressive, but it's not super fun to have to try to always keep finding your Dunsparces back out and then keep drawing back into your Dunsparces to draw cards. When you do just draw your Dunsparce line consistently, the deck feels way better. Honestly, draws way more cards. However, Drakloak is just more consistent in general because it stays on the board. You don't have to keep finding it. You don't have to keep using resources to draw back into it, allowing it to more consistently provide value. Of course, Dragapult is also just an incredible attacker. It's one of the best attackers you could have in any deck right now. And although it's mostly here for Cornerstone, there will be times where you just have an extra energy for the turn, so you attach to it, attach a Fire or a Psychic to it, and threaten the Phantom Dive play. Especially with the Dreaded Brain, you can even go for a 3-prize Phantom Dive play, or if you just it won't come up super often, but sometimes you will just miss your Make It Rain attack, and your best line will be to try to Phantom Dive twice for 4 prizes to play around things like Fezandipiti. So although you don't use Dragapult, the situations that you use Dragapult may seem pretty rare, especially if you've been playing the deck a lot. You realize more and more how often you are just using Make It Rain strictly. But there are a lot of niche situations where it will come up. If you are watching this, I recommend you do watch my tournament report from Milwaukee, because I actually did have, I think in 5 different games, how to attack with Dragapult, at least, I think twice in each game. So if you want to hear about a lot of the little situations where Dragapult can come up, that would be a good video to reference. If you have Fezandipiti, of course, just that extra draw power, won't over-explain that. And then Munkidori, allowing us to keep our Pokemon healthy against Dragapult and Gardevoir is the primary purpose of Munkidori in the deck. Gholdengo is a little bit difficult to knock out, so Munkidori just makes it all the more difficult for them. supporters. For Arven, we're a TM Evo deck. We're trying to TM Evo turn 1 almost every game, assuming we're going second. But even when we don't TM Evo turn 1, we're against Buddy decks especially, we're trying to Evo TM every single game, sometimes even twice a game. Honestly, against Buddy decks pretty often, I'll Evo TM twice in a game, so definitely want to max out the Arven count there. Playing 2 Ciphermaniacs Codebreaking. I don't love more copies of these over like other draw supporters, which is why I only play the 2 and play the line that I do. But once you're set up, which you have multiple Gholdengos in play, it is the best card for confirming that you'll be able to take a knockout that turn. And then, of course, if you already have all the resources that you need without playing a supporter, is fantastic for Iono proofing yourself as well. Then we play 2 copies of Boss's Orders. We just want to make sure that we can pull up 2 prize Pokemon mostly to get those key knockouts. 2 Professor Turo Scenario. So I played 1 in my list for Milwaukee, and I've mostly played 1 throughout this format. However, I've added the second one in with the idea of focusing on beating the Dragapult and Gardevoir matchup in mind. I think that most games that you play against Gardevoir and Dragapult, if you play the Turo at the right time, those are just winning, like super winning matchups. I think that like the Turo really makes a difference in any game against Gardevoir and Dragapult. So it's playing 2 to make sure that we can use that more consistently, or even pull off 2 in a game against those decks, makes those matchups much more consistently favorable. Then we have 1 copy of Iono. It is like pivotal to have a little bit of disruption, especially with Countercatcher. We can like Countercatcher the Fezandipiti Iono on the same turn, so even we can still play around Fezandipiti with the Iono play. It's also just nice as another draw supporter early game. I really like in an opening hand or a turn 2 hand, Iono usually feels way better than like a third Ciphermaniac. And yeah, I can't overstate really how much that end game disruption does like win you games. Obviously, it can be a bit awkward to play with Superior Energy Retrieval. However, if you use it right, Iono is just such a powerful card in this deck. And if you do have to go for like a Phantom Dive line, Iono is always going to be pretty key to that strategy as well. 1 copy of Brock Scouting. So this is what I cut the third Cipher for, that most lists play third Cipher. I play the Brock Scouting. I really like having Brock Scouting in the deck. I used it a ton at Milwaukee. It basically functions as like a 5th Arven. I had like one of my first rounds of Milwaukee. I like Pokégeared on turn 1 with no other supporters in my hand, and the only supporter I found was Brock, and I was immediately very happy that I included Brock in my deck. There are also games where I Ciphermaniac'd my Brock on top of the deck under Ichipollen, because as like my only way to search for more Pokemon. Just sort of when you're under Ichipollen and you're just trying to set up, maybe you had like a weak opening hand, so the item lock's really getting to you. Brock Scouting is pretty much always like the best thing that you can get off of Cipher, so it's really nice for that as well. And it's just amazing under Ichipollen in general. Such a fantastic card for making the deck more consistent against decks with Badoo. Items, we have for Buddy-Buddy Poffin, just want to find as many of those as possible early game. For Spirit Energy Retrieval, of course, to get our energy back for Make It Rain. 2 copies of Ultra Ball, so that we have some ways to search out our Gholdengos and our Drakloaks. Then 2 copies of Earthen Vessel. I know 1 has been the standard, and then sort of as in Milwaukee, a lot of lists have gone up to 2. And I've been liking the 2 as well. It just helps a lot against decks with Genesect in particular. Makes a really big difference to have 2 copies of Earthen Vessel to get your energy out when you can't use Energy Search Pro. And of course, just increases your consistency in general. Earthen Vessel is a great card in the deck. 2 copies of Night Stretcher. Important to have that bit of recovery. We play lots of Pokemon that we want to get back. We really, we really want to keep as many like Gholdengos set up as possible. We always want to like be able to get our Fezandipiti back if it gets knocked out, get our Munkidori back if it gets knocked out, and then of course being able to just Night Stretcher to get an energy back for Make It Rain is also very nice. 1 copy of Nest Ball. Mostly, it is just like another consistency card that we can find turn 1 for some additional draw, but it mostly functions for searching out like Fezandipiti and Munkidori off of an Arven search. Then we have 1 copy of Pokégear just to find our supporters a little bit more consistently, especially to dig for like Boss and Turo at the right times. But then of course it just sort of has the versatility of getting us our setup supporters turn 1, Arven or Brock, and Cipher at the right time, or Turo and Boss in the late game, mid to late game. 1 copy of Countercatcher. Since we usually start with a single prize board and then want to go 2-2-2 from there, it gets very important to have that Countercatcher to punish our opponents for taking that first prize. And then Counter Catcher, once our opponent does take one prize, if we take 2/2/2 from there, it's pretty much live the entire game, so it just doesn't always an Arven searchable target. Or we can combine it with something like Iono or Turo. Then one copy of Switch to have a little bit of mobility if we need to like switch our Gholdengo into Dragapult or vice versa, or get our Fez or Munkidori out of the active without having to retreat them. And of course just serves as a nice draw card in the deck as well, since we can coin bonus with the active, switch into another Gholdengo, and get that one extra draw from coin bonusing in the active spot on a second Gholdengo. And then we have one copy of Energy Search Pro, of course, the A-spec that the deck is built around, allowing us to get just one big search early game to get all of our energy out. That way we get our first knockout really easily, and then we can just superior energy retrieval the energy back from there, since getting them out for the first knockout is typically the hardest one. Now for stadiums, we're playing one copy of Artazon. I played Jamming Tower Milwaukee, and I actually was playing 2 Jamming Tower for a while before Milwaukee, just to really beat down on Gardevoir and other decks that are super Ritual reliant, which Dragapult, and like Joltik Box both fall under. However, with 2 Turo in the deck, I feel like my Gardevoir and Dragapult matchups are super good already. I feel like that does more for the matchup than the single copy of Jamming Tower. And with those matchups, in my mind, sort of shored up, I would just rather just play the Artazon for additional consistency cards, so that I set up a little bit better, more consistently, if I don't need to like specifically tech for those matchups. And then, of course, having it out to my opponent's Jamming Towers as well, I feel like we're seeing more Jamming Tower floating around in other decks, which can be annoying if they get a super early game to stop our Evo TMs. Next, we have 2 Technical Machine Evolutions. Like I was saying, like you want to TM Evo pretty much every game, usually into double Drakloak. I think that might be a mistake that people make, but it's easier to, get your Drakloaks out and use Recon Directive, which sees the top 4 cards, basically, 2 Recon Directives, to try to find your Gholdengos, than it is to use your, 1-card coin bonuses to try to find Drakloaks, especially because you have more Gholdengos. If you Evo into 2 Gholdengo, and then you're trying to draw into Drakloaks, then you're only going to have 2 Drakloak in deck, whereas if you even do 2 Drakloak, you're going to have 4 Gholdengo in deck to potentially hit off the Recon Directives. Recon Directive just also digs deeper into your deck in general. Obviously, it draws about the same number of cards, since you only get to keep 1. However, your bench Recon Directives do give you the option between 2 cards, whereas your bench coin bonuses just see 1. So typically we're TM Evoing, just a tip that I wanted to make sure people are aware of, that we're typically Evo TMing into double Drakloak, unless we, can't for whatever reason. And then Energy, we're playing 3 Metal, make sure that we can set up multiple Gholdengo EX. And then 2 Dark Energy, and then 1 of every other energy. I know, some of course playing more Fire or Psychic to have more ways to attack with Dragapult, but of course this list is not playing like Crisp or anything like that. We're not focusing on attacking Dragapult. Most games you do not. It's just sort of a nice option to have. And then of course the 2 Dark Energies to make sure that we can use Munkidori every game. Don't have to worry about prizing one of those. It's also just nice to have a second copy of another energy. That way we can Earthen Vessel for Metal Dark, and then Energy Search Pro still get a Metal Dark on a future turn. Whereas, and you'll see sort of how that comes out. We're having that extra energy that you have more than one of. It just improves your odds of searching out the maximum number of Energy Search Pro consistently. Next, we go into the matchup section, starting with our favorable matchups. We have Gardevoir, just very difficult for them to one-shot a Gholdengo. It takes a while for them to get to the Drifloon one-shot range, and at that point you're usually multiple prize cards ahead. Usually you take a 3 prize-ish lead against Gardevoir, maybe even more. You can boss up their Gardevoir and knock it out pretty easily when it comes out. It's really easy for you to hit those numbers, and then they can't really put too much Adrenabrain damage on your board. Otherwise, you might be able to Adrenabrain on their Drifloon when it does attack to knock it out. They still are going to have to worry about the potential of you playing something like Jamming Tower, and just generally. And then of course, if they ever want to try to knock you out with Gardevoirs and stuff, they're just most likely just going to get Turo'd and then slam for a one-shot back. So it really just your prize lead ends up being pretty significant. That by the time they get to swinging for one-shots with Drifloon, it's a little bit too late. And then we have Dragapult Dusknoir. Pretty similar, honestly. You just want to go for... You have to worry about them trying to blow up your entire board with Dusknoir. So this matchup, to play around Unfair Snap, you just want to make sure that you set up your board as well as possible. Get multiple Gholdengos out, multiple Drakloaks out. before actually playing into Unfair Stamp. You can like knock out one Badoo if your opponent only has Dreepies on board, because at that point they're not going to go like Unfair Stamp plus Phantom Dive. That's the way you have to be scared of. You have to be yeah, so if they have a Drakloak with an energy, then you have to play around Unfair Stamp. Then you have to worry about them going Unfair Stamp Phantom Dive. But you can sort of boss up their Drakloaks with energy as well early game, to sort of get some energy in the discard pile for superior energy retrieval access, and buy yourself time where they're not going to be able to attack. That way you can extend your prize lead by the time that they start attacking. Once they do start attacking, of course, you can punish their attacks by just drawing into Turo really easily, and then pretty consistently hit one-shots on Dragapult, especially if you get some Adrenabrain damage in there to heal your board up and knock out their Dragapult a little bit easier. And then, of course, we have Dragapult without Dusknoir, so definitely less scary in the early game. You don't have to worry about like a bunch of Dusknoirs being set up and blowing up your board. However, you do, of course, have to worry about Genesect. You can play the matchup pretty similarly. I definitely would say it's a little bit worse than the Dragapult Dusknoir matchup. The 2 Earthen Vessel helps. It's just a matter of you're less likely, when they do go for the like Unfair Stamp Dragapult play, you're less likely to draw out of it and find all the energy to knock out a Dragapult. So you're going to be like one turn behind a lot of the time. If you do manage to find all the energy, great. You're trying to do basically the same thing and set up your board really consistently. If you do manage to find all your energy and just knock out the first Dragapult when it comes out, you should have a very, very easy time. You should just be running them over at that point. However, that is going to be less likely that you're able to do that. If you're not able to find that, you're not able to find Munkidori, then they might get like a 4-prize Phantom Dive off and knock out double Gholdengo, and then you could be in a tricky spot, but definitely still a very favorable matchup. Next, we have the Gholdengo Mirror. Now, I'll talk specifically about non-Dragapult builds, because obviously the Dragapult Gholdengo deck is 50-50. But you actually have a slight edge into most other Gholdengo builds because you can attack with Drakloak. So basically, you don't put any 2-prize Pokemon into play, and then you just set up Dragon Headbutt for your first prize. That way, you throw off your opponent's prize trade. Now, if your opponent has some way to also try to take the first prize card, then you might just have to end up attacking with Gholdengo, but you do still have a slight edge because a lot of other Gholdengo lists don't play Iono, and you have Iono to have an option to hand disrupt. Most of the time, the Iono is probably not going to stick, but it does still give you a slight advantage because of that potential for them to miss a knockout off of Iono. So, not a ridiculously favorable matchup, but a favorable matchup nonetheless. You just have some slight advantages with Drakloak and Iono. Next, we have the Joltik Box matchup. Now, this matchup isn't as favorable as it was for me at Milwaukee, since I was playing the Vengeful Punch to have a way to prevent Pikachu from one-shotting me. However, if you play around Iron Hands, well, at least the second Iron Hands, by not over-benching too many 2-prizers, and then you force them to just like mow through Gholdengos with Pikachu, then it's not super easy for them to chain attacks into Gholdengo, and you should be able to, eventually they should just like sort of whiff an attack at some point to knock out a Gholdengo and put you into a pretty good spot that way. Especially if you can like time your Iono well, with maybe like a counter catcher on Fezandipiti to disrupt them out of a knockout one turn. That's really, really strong as well. It's not very easy for them to set up like a board with not enough 2-prizers that you can just sort of boss around the Pikachu anyways for 2 prize cards every turn. And you should, honestly, a lot of the time be able to get a 2-prize knockout if you can get like a turn 2 or like a boss knockout on something before they can amp you very much. Something that you might not even give them an amp you very much target, so they might have to go for a Pikachu EX for their first 2 prize cards if you are able to go second and just like Evo TM turn 1, 2 Gimmighoul's into Gholdengo, then they use Joltik, and then you evolve your other Gimmighoul into Gholdengo, and they don't get any value out of Amp very much, and just have to go with Pikachu. It's really difficult for them to set up 3 Pikachu in a row consistently. Even matchups, we have Terra Box. So Terra Box, of course, can just like get turn 2 Torrential Pump on you and just like spam Torrential Pump and Pikachu, and that can obviously give you a lot of trouble. If you can like Evo TM with a Gimmighoul into 2 Gholdengos turn 1, then you prevent the Torrential Pump for 2 prizes option for them, and then usually they'll have to put 2 prizes in play to set up anyways, or they have a pretty high chance of opening 2 prizes as well, just because they play a lot of them. So they'll a lot of time be a 2-prize target for you to try to take your first 2 prize cards on. If you don't manage to get the 2-prize lead, then your Iono and Phantom Dive can both have some potential late game to try to swing the prize shape down to your favor. They are a Noctowl deck, so they can be pretty weak to Iono if you go for the same sort of strategy that she'll box with a late game counter catcher on Fezandipiti plus Iono, or even like on a Hoot Hoot. If you have to take a one prize early, then you can counter catcher another Hoot Hoot later to even out your prize trade on your Iono turn, and then go for 2 prizes on your last turn if they miss knockout. So fairly even. I think that like you have a pretty good chance of either disrupting them out of a win or just taking the first 2 prize cards. But of course, they still have pretty decent odds of you like not being able to set up the optimal board turn 1, and they go for like a torrential pump turn 2, Pika, and just like don't miss knockouts. And lastly, we have our unfavorable matchup, which is Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt is just really difficult right now if they play optimally to get the first 2 prizes on them. You really have to hope that they open a 2-prizer or have to bench a 2-prizer to get an attack off turn 2, like Teal Mask to activate Noctowl at least. That way you have a counter-catcherable target, but even then you still have to find your counter-catcher because you're probably not going to find like Boss 5 Energy turn 2 consistently, although it is definitely possible if you like open the boss. But then so many games they'll be able to just set up a 1-prize board and either take like a knockout with Assault Landing turn 1 or 2 for the first prize of the game, and then you can only take at most 1 prize back, and if you use a 2-prizer to do that, then they're going to go down to, then they can just use a 1-prizer again to go down to 4, you go down to 4, and now they just have the strict prize lead. They just have to Raging Bolt, Bellowing Thunder twice. You don't really have good single prize attack options yourself. You can try to go for like a Dragon Headbutt, but typically they're just going to out-tempo you. So yeah, you sort of have to hope you get a little bit lucky. I think that the matchup's not that bad. I think all of your matchups are fine with this deck. I don't think you have any like strict losses. However, I do think Raging Bolt is one of your worst matchups just because of the potential for them to just get turn 1 like Rotom, Assault Landing, or turn 2 going first. Just set up a single prize attacker and take the prize lead very consistently. But there will be a decent number of games where they just like open a 2-prizer, and so you have an out there. That's all I have for you today, though. If you want more, a more in-depth look at this deck, or just like sort of more detail added on to what you've already heard today, maybe you're planning on playing it for Portland and just want as much information as possible, I would definitely recommend checking out my tournament report from Milwaukee. I go through how I played out all of my games from the tournament, and I think it provides a lot of insight into what your thought process should be going to, at least the matchups that I played against that weekend. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did and want to check out some of my other content or my socials, all of that will be available in my link tree in the description. Have a great day.